Welcome to session number 5. We have some exciting discoveries to talk about today. Well, today we're continuing working through different eras. We've looked at the pre-kingdom era as far as archaeological discoveries relating to prior to the kingdom starting, the United Kingdom, and then we've been looking at discoveries related to the kingdom. We looked at discoveries relating to David and Solomon. Now we're in that was the United Kingdom era. Now we are looking at discoveries related to the divided kingdom era. And from there, we'll move on this week, and next week we'll continue in the divided kingdom era. Then we'll be looking at discoveries related to Babylon, which would be the exilic era, and exilic and post-exilic. So after the 10 northern tribes are taken into captivity by the Assyrians, and the 2 southern tribes are taken into captivity by the Babylonians, we will talk about discoveries from Babylon, and then discoveries related to the post-exilic period after they return from Babylon. Then we will continue into the New Testament and look at discoveries related to the life and ministry of Jesus, and then the life and ministry of the apostles. So that's where we're headed. So this week, next week, we'll continue in the divided kingdom era. Then look forward to that third week, we'll be in Babylon and look at some fascinating discoveries there. So I love this map because it gives you a good idea of those 10 northern tribes, again, collectively known as Israel, the 2 southern tribes known collectively as Judah. This is the divided kingdom era. And last week we talked about the Kirk monolith, which mentioned Ahab. Remember Ahab, this powerful king? And it mentioned the Battle of Karkar. And 12 kings faced Shalmaneser III, and Ahab was one of those. And he contributed over 10,000 soldiers and 2,000 chariots. Well, that was the height of Israel, 10 northern tribes. It was a time of affluence for the kingdom, for the north, and Ahab was a powerful king. Well, now, today, we're going to talk about the Black Obelisk. Only about 12 years later, the kingdom's no longer strong. And we're going to talk about Jehu, who is depicted on this obelisk. Does anybody know what an obelisk? I overheard some discussion over here. Does anybody know what an obelisk is? Has anybody seen an obelisk? Many of you have, right? Where have you seen an obelisk? Washington Monument, right? This is an obelisk. So an obelisk is a 4-sided stone structure or monument that tapers towards the top and is more of a pyramid at the top. And so the Black Obelisk we're going to talk about is a much smaller version of an obelisk like the Washington Monument, right? And so it's actually about 6 feet, 5 inches, so a little bit taller than me. So some of the relevant passages, there's a lot of relevant passages we could look at that mention Jehu, specifically king of Israel, 10 northern tribes. But here are a few verses we're going to look at and then show how this obelisk, Shalmaneser's obelisk, will affirm the biblical record. 1 Kings 19, verses 16 to 17, we read, "And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint king over Israel. It shall come about, the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death." So we see the name Jehu here 3 times in this one text as to be the next king of Israel, 10 northern tribes. Then 2 Kings 12:1, we read, "In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem." So it's 2 Kings is giving us the overlap of the king of Israel, which is Jehu, 7th year of Jehu's kingdom of being king, and now Jehoash down in Judah. So Jerusalem is part of Judah, the 2 southern kingdoms, right? So this verse is, and we see that several times, this is just one illustration example where it refers to Jehu in the north and speaks of the king of the south in terms of the reign when Jehu was king, right? So we have 2 kings, one in Israel, one in Judea or Judah. Then Hosea 1:4 is a prophecy against Jehu, "And the Lord said to him, Yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel." So this prophecy of judgment upon Israel, and of course Israel does come to and end the Assyrian captivity, right? And of course, we'll talk about actually Sargon next, who is one of the Assyrian kings. So let me introduce you to Austin Henry Layard. In 1846, he was excavating at ancient Nimrod and discovered the Black Obelisk there. This is where that is, modern day Iraq. And here is it in relationship to Mosul. It's approximately 20 miles south of Mosul. Here's a zoomed in version here. Layard's workers encouraged him to stop for the season. It was starting to get cold. The ground was going to get hard. Winter was coming, but he insisted on working just one more day. And guess what happened in that day? On that day, they discovered this obelisk. He recounts this discovery in his own words. I had business in Mosul and was giving directions to the workmen to guide them during my absence. I doubted whether I should carry it further, but made up my mind at last not to abandon it until my return. So not to close up shop there until his return from Mosul, which would be on the following day. I mounted my horse, but had scarcely left the mound when a corner of a black marble was uncovered. This attracted the notice of the superintendent of the party digging, who ordered the place to be further examined. Layard goes on to say, the corner was part of an obelisk, about 7 feet high, lying on its side. An Arab was sent after me without delay to announce the discovery, and on my return I found the obelisk completely exposed to view. I descended eagerly into the trench and was immediately struck by the singular appearance and evident antiquity of the remarkable monument before me. The whole was in the best preservation. Scarcely a character of the inscription was wanting, and the figures were as sharp and well defined as if they had been carved but a few days before. So on the last day of as he's on his way to Mosul, they uncover this and go get him, and he comes back and he sees this incredible limestone, a black obelisk. It's comprised of black limestone. He estimated in his words 7 feet, but it was 6.5 feet high. So I'm 6'1", so about 4 inches higher than me, and 17.7 inches wide at the top, down to about 24 inches wide at the base. So you can see the inscriptions below these different reliefs, different depictions, and then you can see also space where it would have gone into the ground, so that there's not inscription in the part that would be in the ground. And then you have an inscription at the top of it as well, and you have inscriptions between each of those reliefs, each of those pictures. This is an ancient Akkadian inscription in the Akkadian language, and it has, now on the left is the obelisk, on the right is a drawing of it, the 4 different reliefs, different sides of it, I should say, with 5 pictures on each. So 20 paneled, so 20 panels, 5 on each side, 4 sides. And James Pritchard, a well-known archaeologist, says it this way: the panels were intended to be viewed in 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from the top to the bottom, each running around the 4 sides of the obelisk, as though in a continuous frieze or continuous actions. So these depict various kings that were conquered by him, by Shalmaneser. These 5 rows of panels, on each of them, the 4 sides with wording engraved above each panel, describing, so the engraving below this is actually for the picture below this one, but these are depicting different scenes of different kings who are giving homage to Shalmaneser. So Shalmaneser is the one that has commissioned this obelisk to, again, make a name for himself, to brag about his victories of war and conquering these kings. And so these depictions are these kings and their people bringing gifts to lay at the feet of Shalmaneser. There's another depiction on one side, 5 different kings that are conquered. And this is the one that we're most interested in and the one that's pictured in your notes, because this is Jehu laying down with his head down to the ground in front of Shalmaneser on the left. And these depictions above are the gods of Shalmaneser. So this is what's most interesting to us, the first depiction of an Israeli king face to the ground and paying tribute, homage to Shalmaneser and offering gifts to him. Here's the same picture at the top with it drawing below to be very clear there. His nose is to the floor. He doesn't even want to look at the king as showing a sign of respect to him. You see in the picture a bowl that Shalmaneser is holding, possibly that was given by Jehu. And above the picture is a winged disc and a star that symbolizes the gods, Ashur and Ishtar. When we get to Babylon, we'll talk about the Ishtar Gate, right? One of the gods named, the gate named after Ishtar. Jehu, let's see, Todd Bolin, a scholar and professor at Masters University, he actually has a great website called BiblePlaces.com. If you're interested, he did his PhD at Dallas Seminary in the department I teach in. He was kind enough. He lived in Israel for many years, worked for an extension site of Masters University in Israel called IBEX. And he was kind enough to allow me to use a lot of his pictures. I used some of mine, but many of his and a few other people's in my book, over 110 pictures. The majority were his, and I'm thankful for it. But he has done a lot of research and writing, and his dissertation was related to Jehu. And his doctoral dissertation, final product, he writes, Jehu has taken a risk in aligning himself with the Assyrians against Hazael, as history would show that proved to be a poor gamble. Assyrian records reveal that within months of his accession, Jehu was subject to Shalmaneser. Between Assyrian vassalage and Aramean conquest, it's doubtful if Jehu ever knew true independence again. And here's the top of that. You can see the right side is Jehu. It's at the top of this obelisk. And again, the obelisk contains the only recorded, recovered contemporary drawing or depiction of a Israeli king. You have ones today, but obviously we don't know what they look like. So this one would be actually representing what he would have looked like. Jehu's surrounded by Assyrian attendants. Those are Assyrian attendants, 2 behind Shalmaneser on the left and 2 behind Jehu on the right. There are 13 additional Israelites that are depicted around the obelisk, paying tribute to Shalmaneser. The Black Obelisk inscription, so you've got above this an inscription, and the Black Obelisk inscription reads, I received tribute of Jehu, son of Omri. Significant, mentioning Jehu, mentioning Omri, so we know who that depiction is, who that is. Silver, gold, a gold bowl, a gold base, gold goblets, and gold buckets, 10, a royal scepter, and spears. So these are the things that Jehu gave to Shalmaneser, according to the Black Obelisk. So what's the significance? Biblical significance. How does it relate to the Bible? Well, the Black Obelisk affirms that a historical figure named Jehu lived and ruled over the 10 northern tribes of Israel, just as the Bible states. Second, the Black Obelisk affirms the specific time frame in which the biblical account assigns Jehu as king over Israel. So at the time of Shalmaneser in Assyria, which is what the Bible depicts as well. So key figures, Jehu, Shalmaneser, same time, contemporaries. Third, the Black Obelisk affirms that descendants of Omri ruled over the northern tribes of Israel. We looked at Omri, was mentioned last week in the Moabite stone. So Omri, house of Omri, so that would be the dynasty of Omri or descendants of Omri, or really the rule of Israel, these different kings that come after Omri. So it affirms the existence of Omri as well. If there was a dynasty from the line of Omri, this record also affirms the historical figure by the name of Omri, who lived and ruled over Israel. And fifth, The Black Obelisk affirms the military strength and dominating force of the Assyrian Empire. Now we have the Assyrian Empire coming to power, whereas before Ahab was stronger. Now Jehu is weaker. The Assyrian Empire is becoming the dominant world threat, and soon, even as we read, the promise made that God's statement of judgment against Jehu and Israel is that they're going to fall. Right? They're going to be taken. And of course, we know that's what happens. And we'll look at that next week in the captivity, the interaction with Sennacherib. And we'll look at it a little bit today with Lachish, actually, too. So this can be found. This is another discovery, Mark, you're going to need to look at in the British Museum, the Black Obelisk, when you visit there. And by the way, in my upcoming book, I have in the back, I have a list of all these 51 discoveries, and every museum they can be found in. And some at the Louvre in Paris, some in the British Museum, some in the Israel Museum, some in Pergamum Museum in Berlin, and some in Chicago at the, they've changed the name. I'll mention it because the Sargon II and the Lamassu, these can be found in the Chicago Museum. Fascinating? Yes. So the question was, how far down did they have to dig? And I'm not sure how far down that was, but yeah, it would be layers of civilizations, and they do want to go down deep so they can see those different layers. But I'm not sure how far down they had to go for this particular discovery. The Syrians, so Hazael would be in the north, and the Syrians would be in the east. So he's partnering with a different king, hoping that that alliance would be able to fend off the Assyrians. And that was a bad, well, he might have been able to exist. The kingdom of Israel might have been a vassal kingdom. That is, that they pay off the king of Assyria. That's what Hezekiah is going to try to do. The question was, who was it that Jehu was partnering with here? Hazael. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. Hazael. What would have happened if he'd lied, made an alliance with the Assyrians? Well, he might have been able to live there, and the kingdom might have continued longer as a vassal kingdom. That is, as a paid off. That's what Hezekiah is going to do. He's going to try to pay off Sennacherib, and he does do that. He gives them gold from the house of Yahweh. And that wasn't a good decision. But we'll look at that next week. Sennacherib's prism. Yes. Yeah, the best decision would have been to trust God, trust Yahweh, and remove all the pagan places of worship at high places that they were allowing people to worship the pagan gods. Very good. All right, well, let's look at another discovery we're going to talk about today. It relates to Sargon II, another Assyrian king. Sargon II and what we call Lamassu. You might recall the Lamassu that were destroyed during the ISIS period of time. These were some of the things that ISIS destroyed in Mosul, in the museums there, because it's pagan, right? We agree it's pagan, but they were destroying it because they don't want any objects like this that relate to, that don't relate to Allah, right? And so they destroyed a lot of these items. So Sargon II and the Lamassu, let's talk about that. We're still talking about the 10 northern tribes of Israel. And the main text we are looking at today is Isaiah, chapter 20, verse 1. These others are important in the text there, but Isaiah 20, verse 1, we read, "In the year that the supreme commander sent by Sargon, king of Assyria, came to Ashdod," another location, "and attacked and captured it." So we have here the name of Sargon, is reference to him being king of Assyria, and a city that's we know of in Palestine in ancient land there, Ashdod. Before the discovery of Sargon II's palace, we're going to talk about, skeptics did not believe Sargon existed. That this again was a fictitious person, just a made-up character. They're the minimalists who do not believe that the Bible is historically reliable. Said, well, Sargon, this person mentioned in Isaiah 20, verse 1, there's no archaeological records that he ever existed. Therefore, it's probably just made up. The discovery of Sargon's palace and these Lamassu and these inscriptions that mention Sargon silenced these critics. This is Paul Emile Botta in 1842. He was a consul in Mosul. So he was appointed by the French consul to represent them in Mosul. And this allowed him the opportunity to do some discoveries, right? To take some adventures to try to locate key places. 1 year later, he discovered the palace of Sargon II. He was looking for these ancient cities of Assyria. And he found this palace, the palace of Sargon II, in modern-day Khorsabad, around modern-day Khorsabad, Iraq. So it only took him a year being stationed there in his adventures of trying to discover these ancient Assyrian cities. So here's Khorsabad, Iraq, in relationship to Jerusalem. And here's Khorsabad, Iraq, in relationship to ancient Nineveh, about 15 miles north of Nineveh. This is the palace that he discovered, Sargon II's palace. He discovered 14 large rooms. The walls and the doors of these rooms were covered with inscriptions and reliefs or pictures. And he's the one that oversaw the construction of this incredible palace. Again, they created these palaces and these monuments to brag about their military exploits and to leave a legacy for themselves. Major excavations at this location took place after him by the French and then later by the Oriental Institute of Chicago. That's where this museum is at, the Oriental Institute of Chicago. But they've since changed the name because that's not too politically correct, I think. Oriental Institute. Now it's known as the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, West Asia and North Africa. Try to remember that. You better write it down if you want to go there. It's known as the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, West Asia and North Africa. It's part of the Chicago University, or University of Chicago. They discovered in these excavations, overseen by the French first and then by the Oriental Institute of Chicago, they uncovered more than 200 rooms at Sargon's palace. That's a mammoth palace. And 30 courtyards. Here's an interesting picture of the beginning of its discovery, right? The largest city in the ancient world would have been it. Sargon's making it his capital city. And you can see the Lamassu there, which is a animal-like being with a human head. And they believe Sargon II, it's his head that's being used on these Lamassu. So here is a older picture, an actual picture as they're excavating and digging this. Can you imagine discovering this? Major excavations here took place on several occasions, as I mentioned, by the French, then by the Oriental Institute. They uncovered more than 200 rooms, as I mentioned, right? But this was discovered by our friend here, Paul Emile Botta. And once this is excavated, here is what you see. These Lamassu. And the next picture is it brought into the museum. So these are sometimes called colossal bowls or Lamassu. If you read either of those, they're describing the same thing. These Lamassu were positioned to guard Sargon II's palace. So at the entrance, and this would be the gods guarding his palace. Again, the heads, they believe, were depicting Sargon himself. These are massive, 14 feet tall and 15 feet wide. And there are many of these, and that's why you can find them in Mosul. Well, they've been destroyed in Mosul. I'm not sure how many remain that were hidden before ISIS destroyed many of them. You can find them also at other locations like the Louvre in France. He would have brought it back to the Louvre in France, and then also in the the Chicago Institute. I'll just call it the old name, Chicago Oriental Institute. Anything interesting as you look at this? What's that? That's right. Very good. Very observant. See, you got 5 legs. This was intended to give the appearance of movement from the side, but from the front, stationary, by having the 5 legs, right? So this is, again, discovered at the entrance to this palace. Yes, yeah. So if you want to see it, you need to go to the Louvre. I still owe my wife for never taking her to Paris and living in Hungary for those 13 years. So I've not been to the Louvre, but here is another Lamassu this is different one. See, there are not 5 legs on this particular one, but Sargon commissioned different chronologies or annals to be written under it. You can see underneath it, we'll see the inscriptions that Sargon's bragging of the different cities he conquered, including Philistine cities, like Ashdod was the Philistine city that's mentioned in the Bible as well. Here's a drawing of that, and you can see the inscription a little bit better there. He brags that he conquered several of these Philistine cities, as well as Samaria, parts of Samaria, and led them away to 27,290 of Israelis, of Jewish people. 27,290 is what he brags about. So here again is a picture of them on the left. And then there's a depiction to the right of that, and to the left of that we're going to talk about as well. Sargon is depicted. Many of the artifacts discovered there were these Lamassu, as well as reliefs describing and picturing Sargon and some of his attendants. 14 feet tall, 15 feet long. This particular one, I'm sure they varied, but this particular one is 14 feet tall, 15 feet long. And then if you zoom in here, you can see the inscription a little bit better on this particular Lamassu. And here's what he brags about. I besieged and captured Samaria. I took as spoil 27,290 people who live there. I besieged Ashdod, Gath, those are Philistine cities, and Ashdod, Yam, and captured them. I reorganized these cities, and I appointed my eunuch as governor. Anything in brackets is reconstructed that is not visible, able to be detected for sure, but there's enough text around it to understand or think what it originally would have been. The gods in whom they trust I counted as spoil, 200 chariots. I organized as a royal contingent from them. The rest of them I settled in Assyria. So he took them, these from Samaria, and settled them in Assyria. I resettled Samaria more densely, so many more people than before, and brought their people from the lands of my conquest. So he's talking about destruction, taking people from Samaria, right? which is part of Israel, the 10 northern tribes of Israel. But when we get to the New Testament, Samaria is mentioned a lot, right? We think about the Samaritans that were at odds with the Jewish people, and the Good Samaritan. Remember that story. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Elsewhere, he speaks of the different cities that he attacked, who lived in Arabia and in the desert, who knew neither overseer nor commander, who never brought tribute to any king with the help of Assur, my lord, so is God. I defeated them. So down in Arabia, he defeated these people groups, and I deported the rest of them. I settled them in Samaria. That's a typo there. So it ends there. I settled them in Samaria. So here we have people that from Arabia that are conquered by him and imported into Samaria, and you have the Samaritan people living in Samaria that are taken into Assyria. Right? This is what people do when they conquer a land. Oftentimes they move their own people in it. Think of Crimea in Ukraine and Russia. Right? Why is there a lot of Russian-speaking people in Crimea? Because you do that to say, my people there, I'm protecting my people. Right? And that's to make them good citizens as well, right? To make that a place that's not going to revolt. Well, that's what Sargon does. Here's a depiction of Sargon. He's pictured, let's see, he's the one on the left here with standing on the left with a staff in his right hand and his left hand's on the butt of his sword. You can see that there. And across from him is another bearded individual. Some think it was his son Sennacherib, which will be very important next week, Sennacherib. Others just believe it's an important Assyrian official. So we know the one on the left is Sargon II, who deports all of these people from Samaria and imports a lot of people from Arabia there. But we're not certain about who's on the right. It could be Sennacherib as well. So what is the significance here? Well, there's a lot. Right? First, Sargon II was a real historical king, just as Isaiah recorded, even though the skeptics denied he ever existed. So it silences the critics. Second, Sargon II attacked and captured Ashdod, just as the Bible states, and again, it affirms another place mentioned in the Bible. So all of this is strong corroborative evidence when we look at all the people, places, and events that the archaeological record affirms. Third, Sargon deported thousands from Samaria and repopulated it with foreigners from Arabia, providing an explanation for the hostility between the Jewish people and the Samaritans, as recorded in the book of Ezra, the Gospels, and Acts. Why did the Samaritans not like the Jewish people? Why did the Jewish people not like the Samaritans? Well, the Samaritans were some Jewish people intermarried with these people that have been imported by Assyria. And so they're perceived to be compromisers, right? They're worshiping at Mount Gerizim rather than at the Holy Hill, right? At Mount Zion in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. And and they've intermarried. And so the Jewish people don't like them, and they don't like the Jewish people. So it gives us a better understanding of why this hostility between the Samaritans and the Jewish people. Interesting. So this inscription, this relief, and the colossal bulls can be viewed in the British Museum. And I've seen this one. These two colossal bulls can be viewed at the British Museum. So here's another thing for you to see. And here's almost the exact opposite, right? A virtual mirror image of the one we just looked at, the relief where Sargon was on the left. Now he's on the right on this picture. He still has a staff in his hand showing authority. He still has his other hand on the butt of his sword. This is available. You can see this in the Louvre. Here it is. You can see it on the left in the Louvre, the museum in Paris, then those Lamassu to the right of that. Looks like a beautiful place to visit. And then this is on display at the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, West Asia and North Africa, also known formerly as the Oriental Institute of Chicago. So you can make a 20-hour drive up to Chicago and see it. Yeah, great question. The question is, how is it decided which museums these items go to? Well, it starts with who gets the rights and permissions to go and excavate. So the French were the first to go there. And so that's why the Louvre was the first museum that focused on ancient Assyria in their collections. So it begins that way. That's why I jokingly said, I think once, that the colonizers get the best stuff. Because the British Museum, they're in a lot of places around the world. And while they're there, they did some excavations and brought stuff back to the British Museum. And same goes for the Germans in Pergamon Museum and the French in the Louvre. So that's how it starts. But then sometimes museums will purchase these at great cost. And sometimes they will. Huge things like this are hard to move around, but some exhibits move to museums for a period of time. But once you get something so important as this, rarely do you give it away or sell it even. All right, let's look at one more discovery today, the Lachish Relief. This is another fascinating discovery. This is in the British Museum. This is just one part of one panel of 14 panels that filled the whole room of the palace of Sennacherib. It was also discovered by Austin Henry Layard, who we talked about in the Black Obelisk. He's the one that discovered the Lachish Reliefs as well. And the Lachish reliefs were discovered in Nineveh, ancient Nineveh, modern-day Iraq. In 1847, he discovered what's called the Southwest Palace of Sennacherib. And he excavated there and found 21 different rooms at this palace. 21. So when you think of Lachish, you may not have heard of the city of Lachish, but this would have been the second most important city of ancient Judah. So Jerusalem being the most important. Keep that in mind. Jerusalem would be the most important. Lachish, the second most important. Thankfully, Layard records for us the discovery. He says in his words, I had opened no less than 71 halls or chambers and passages whose walls, almost without an exception, had been paneled with slabs of sculptured alabaster, recording the wars, the triumphs, and the great deeds of the Assyrian king. By a rough calculation, about 9,880 feet or nearly 2 miles of bas reliefs. So these reliefs were all over this incredible palace. Formed by colossal winged bulls and lion sphinxes were uncovered in that part alone of the building explored during my researches. So he's describing the incredible discoveries he made there at Sennacherib's palace. One of the inscriptions reads, Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, a palace without rival. So he's bragging about his palace, that he's the king of the world, and the Assyrian Empire was the most powerful, dominant world threat at that time. It was a threat to Hezekiah. We'll see that next week. It was certainly a threat to Judea, as Lachish is one of those cities that are conquered. So this inscription was discovered at Sennacherib's palace in what's called Room 1, and he's, again, trying to make a name for himself. So this is the room in the British Museum, and these are some of the panels that have been recovered. They don't have, I think they're missing 4 panels there, but they brought back most of them. The others did not survive because Layard did not bring them back with him. The Lachish reliefs at Sennacherib's palace without rival depict the devastating destruction of the city of Lachish. And so he's bragging about his victory. He has a whole room in his throne room. He has a whole, in his palace, he has a whole room depicting the destruction of this important city in Judah, known as Lachish. So as you come in, you follow the approach to Lachish, the destruction of the Lachish, the taking of the prisoners of war and beheading them. All of that is depicted here. And then even on the far right, you can see here, on the far right, there's a circle there. You can barely see that circle. I'll show you a picture of it here in a little bit. But that circle is the camp, a depiction of the camp of Sennacherib, where he would have been watching all of this unfold safely from afar. So here's a picture of them as they approach. You can see on the right, Sennacherib's army with bows and arrows. On the left with, what David used against Goliath. Slingshots, right? Ancient slingshots, right? These are the sharpshooters. As they approach closer, you see people with spears in their hands, as well as wicker shields, ready for hand-to-hand combat. We get closer, and you can see depicted here a siege ramp. They call it a siege engine to go against the circled there and to go against the wall, as you can see. And coming from above, you see fire being thrown down. Here you can see it a little bit close up. So this, what I'm circling here, is close up in this picture. And these slabs show torches and stones being thrown down at the Assyrian army as they approach and try to destroy the walls of Lachish. You can see other citizens that are fleeing the city, and then even more that are going to be taken into captivity. What's going on here? See the men, men being impaled, others filleted alive, still others decapitated. Also depicted are people begging on the left for their lives, and others being paraded before Sennacherib and giving their possessions, spoils of war given to him. Here's that depiction again. On the far left, those are begging for their lives and items being given to Sennacherib. And the inscription there of this throne room, Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, sits on a throne, and the spoils of Lachish pass before him. Notice what's missing here. Yeah. The face of Sennacherib's been badly damaged, as well as his bracelets, probably by an enemy who later take possession of the palace. Some think by his own sons who assassinated him. He had all the world has to offer, but he didn't have his own sons, right? His own sons kill him. And I mentioned that circle from afar. This is a depiction of the Sennacherib's military camp, where he would have been watching all of this attack take place from a safe distance. It includes tents and chariots, soldiers and horses. This is, again, in Judah, the two southern tribes. So significance here. What? First, the inscription on the Lachish Reliefs clearly announces that Sennacherib was the king of Assyria, just as the Bible records repeatedly. Sennacherib's not a small character in the biblical narratives. Second, the depiction of the conquest of Lachish on the relief makes it abundantly clear that Sennacherib was a grave threat to the nation of Judah and King Hezekiah, just as the Bible states. Sennacherib's going to try to take Jerusalem. We'll see that next week. The Lachish relief indicates that Judah was an important nation in the 8th century, just as the Bible depicts. So Judah was an important kingdom, that's important enough that Sennacherib wants to conquer it. Fourth, the Lachish relief makes evident that the city of Lachish was an important city. It was conquered in the 8th century, just as the Bible describes. And fifth, this is really cool, I think, the depiction of the destruction of Lachish, the second most important city of Judah, and not Jerusalem, the most important city of Judah, supports the biblical record that God protected Jerusalem and did not allow Sennacherib to conquer it. And we'll see that next week, where God supernaturally destroys the enemies of Assyria, where God says, Sennacherib is not going to lay foot in your city of Jerusalem. And so, as a friend of mine at Shepherd's Theological Seminary says, Dr. Doug Bookman, the Lachish Reliefs scream, we failed to conquer Jerusalem. Because you can guarantee if Sennacherib had conquered Jerusalem, that palace room, the relief would not be of Lachish. It'd be the relief of the most important and most powerful city of Judah, Jerusalem. This is worth a plane ticket to the British Museum just to watch this. Let me share with you this video of this because I think it's especially helpful. In today's podcast, we will examine an incredible archaeological find discovered at Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh. The discovery visually depicts the destruction of the second most important city in all of Judah. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome to Faith Affirming Findings, a podcast dedicated to sharing with you
the incredible discoveries from the field of biblical archaeology.
These findings will strengthen your faith, affirm the historicity of Scripture, and provide you with unique insights into the culture and background of the Bible.
Now, here is your host, Associate Professor of Bible Exposition at Dallas Theological Seminary,
Dr. Paul Weaver.
Greetings. Today I'm recording this video from upstate New York in Scroon Lake, New York at the Word of Life Bible Institute, where I am teaching the book of Daniel to these amazing students. To learn more about how you can study at the Word of Life Bible Institute, visit wordoflife.edu. Now, for your faith-affirming finding of the week. In last week's episode, we discussed Sennacherib's prism, which affirmed the biblical account that God prevented Sennacherib from conquering Jerusalem, the most important city of Judah. In today's program, I'm going to tell you about the Lachish Relief, which depicts the devastating destruction of the city of Lachish, Israel's second most important city. As you might recall, in 722 BC, Sennacherib and the Assyrian army took the 10 tribes of Israel in the north into captivity. but the two southern tribes, collectively known as Judah, were not conquered. But in 701 BC, Sennacherib returns to Judah and conquers many of the fortified cities of Judah. On Sennacherib's prism that we talked about last week, he brags that he conquered 46 cities in all, including Lachish. The destruction of Lachish is implied in three biblical texts: 2 Kings 18, 13-15, 2 Chronicles 32:1, and Isaiah 36:1 and 2. In Isaiah 36 we read, "Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah with a large army." The Lachish Relief was discovered at ancient Nineveh in the southwest palace of Sennacherib. It is dated between 700 and 681 BC. This relief is comprised of 14 large plaster panels. The panels of this huge relief extend 8 feet high and 80 feet long. These panels would have covered all the walls of this particular room in the palace. Austin Henry Lanyard, the archaeologist who discovered these 14 slabs, brought 10 of them back to the British Museum in 1852, but unfortunately left the first 4, and therefore those 4 have not been preserved for us today. This relief depicts Sennacherib's siege and destruction of the city of Lachish, which occurred in 701 BC. The relief would have been constructed to celebrate this destruction of the second most important city in all of Judah. By the way, if Jerusalem, the most important city of Judah, was conquered, then the relief in the palace of Sennacherib would not have been depicting the siege of Lachish, the second most important city, but rather Jerusalem, the jewel of Judah. As a friend of mine says, the Lachish relief screams, "We failed to conquer Jerusalem." The first 4 slabs on the relief, which have not been preserved but were described by Lanyard, depicts the approach to the city of Lachish by Sennacherib and his soldiers. The next 2 slabs of the relief include a depiction of men with stone slingshots in motion, with the large stones very much visible. Other men are seen with bows and arrows. Both of these groups are attacking from a distance and are the equivalent of ancient snipers. Interestingly, above all the panels are pictures of vineyards, which were prevalent around the city, and in fact, if you visit this location today, you'll see vineyards surrounding the archaeological remains of ancient Lachish. As the relief progresses on the wall, the next 2 slabs contain soldiers nearing the city and depicts men with spears and wicker shields for hand-to-hand combat. On these same 2 slabs of the relief are soldiers approaching even closer to the walls. A siege ramp is visible, and siege engines as well as battering rams, which were used to do damage to the walls and gates of this fortified city. These slabs just mentioned, showing the actual siege of the city walls and gates, were located directly opposite the entrance, and therefore would have been the first thing people would have seen as they entered this room of Sennacherib's palace. These slabs also show torches and stones being thrown down upon the approaching army by the citizens of Lachish. Other citizens are seen fleeing the city. The relief also depicts the aftermath of this destruction. It portrays families who are prisoners of war being taken captive to Nineveh, along with their livestock and other possessions. Also depicted are men being filleted alive, others decapitated, and still others impaled. On another slab, as the relief progresses, Sennacherib is sitting on his throne as prisoners beg for their lives, and the plunder of Lachish is paraded in front of him. Above Sennacherib's throne is an inscription written in cuneiform script that is translated, "Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, sits on a throne, and the spoils of Lachish pass before him." The face of Sennacherib has been damaged, probably by an enemy who later takes possession of this palace, or even his sons, who later assassinate him. Also on this relief can be seen Sennacherib's military camp,
which was probably located on a hill across from the city of Lachish, where Sennacherib could view safely from a distance. It includes tents, chariots, soldiers, and horses. All of this can be seen and is on display at the British Museum in London. It is well worth a visit. What is the takeaway from all of this? First of all, Judah was an important nation in the 8th century, just as the Bible depicts. Second, the city of Lachish was an important city, just as the Bible describes. Third, Sennacherib was a real character who had many military exploits, just as the Bible states. Fourth, and most importantly, the depiction of the destruction of Lachish, the second most important city, and not Jerusalem, the most important city, supports the biblical record that God protected Jerusalem and did not allow Sennacherib to conquer it. See last week's episode in Isaiah 37, 2 Kings 18, 2 Chronicles 32. I hope you'll join us again next week for another wonderful faith-affirming finding. As we approach Easter, we will investigate an important archaeological discovery regarding Pontius Pilate, and the week afterwards, Caiaphas, the high priest. You won't want to miss it. See you next week. And that is your faith-affirming finding for the week.
Faith Affirming Findings podcast is a listener-supported podcast devoted to affirming your faith in the reliability of Scripture and illuminating your understanding of Scripture.
If you would like to help sponsor the Faith Affirming Finding podcast,
You can make a tax-deductible donation of any amount, large or small,
at faithaffirmingfindings.com. That's faithaffirmingfindings.com and click on the Give tab.
We hope you'll join us again next week for another exciting Faith Affirming Finding.
Pretty cool. Come back next week and we'll look at Sennacherib's prison, where he brags about destroying all these other cities, but says nothing about destroying Jerusalem for obvious reasons. All right. Have a great night.